Time for the ride home in ENC.
Yes! Yes! Yes!
This is your 5 o'clock drive with Patrick Johnson.
Holy mackerel!
More news, more interviews, more ECU stories than you can shake a stick at. Hey, stop shaking that stick. This is the Patrick Johnson Show.
Pirates win! Pirates win!
On 94.3 The Game.
Thanks for being with us here on this Wednesday. Our interview we did with Mike Schwartz continues to be the talk of the town. A lot of reaction to that still. If you did not listen to it, want to relive the magic, go to the IBX Media app today. Download it. You can hear or watch that show there. Also, big thanks yesterday to Coach Greg Corinda. Great to have him on. We've got Joe Giglio coming up in a few minutes. We want to leave as much time as possible for that. So let us go ahead and jump into the top 5 at 5 as Philip the Ref Pilkington joins me.
This may very well be our last mission. Let's make it count.
This is the Patrick Johnson Show on 94.3 The Game.
It's impossible.
Now some stories you may have heard.
Ready?
Or catch it for the first time. This is your 5 at 5 with the P-Man.
Number one, all victories last night on the diamond for East Carolina softball. A 10-1 victory over Elon. PJ will hit on that more in a second as he was on the call with that with our friend Courtney Layton. Also, East Carolina baseball with a 4-3 win over Elon. The Pirate pitching staff used 5 different pitchers in the 4-3 victory. Ryan Towers went the longest he had gone at all in a Pirate uniform and the longest he had gone since April of 2023. Obviously, he has been, or 24, excuse me. Obviously, he's been dealing with some injuries. And after the game, Cliff Godwin talked about the great Pirate pitching staff.
I thought RT was great. Did a really good job. Gave us 5 innings. Thought we played some really good defense behind him until late in the game. You know, we shouldn't have dove for a ball and just made some mistakes. But Charlie Hoagland, did a good job for his 1 inning. And of course, it got a little bit messy. But Sean, got us out of the jam and then closed it out in the ninth. I thought RT was great. Did a really good job. Gave us 5. I thought RT was great.
A lot of repeating there.
I think Dan and Mike were in here messing with the thingamajig. I don't know what they were doing.
Well, that's the highly technical term for it, thingamajig. And look, I'm not surprised that they were messing with stuff. So I'm now more looking ahead because I'll be on the call this weekend for all 3 games of the series with UAB. What happens, because we haven't got anything on Colby Weber yet. I guess Herring is available if needed in an emergency pinch hit. That's what it sounded like to me.
Yep.
From what I have gathered in hearing the comments post-game and then talking to some other people today. Could Towers come back? Do you want to disrupt the midweek thing? Because you've got a little thing cooking there now with Ryan Towers. He's gotten better, especially his last 3 midweek starts. So do you want to mess with that? Or do you want to keep it as it is? And then maybe find whatever the next best option is. That Sean Jenkins? Is that someone else? I think it just puts a lot of pressure if Weber's unable to. I mean, certainly I don't think Weber's going this week.
No.
And, it might still be a day or two before we really, really know what that MRI said. And we may not even know it till later in the weekend. From what I understand, as of this morning, there were no returns as of yet on any of the tests that were run on Weber. So I think fair to say there's a good chance we're not going to see Colby Weber this weekend. Beyond that, wait and see. Cliff will tell us when he wants us to know. With all that said, how do you go about this weekend? Against the UAB thing, they've had some problems with pitching. They've won some games, but they have had some issues with their starting pitching. So, we talked about the pitching is the key to ECU this season. It's the strength. But now that you've had an injury to a frontline guy, that makes things a little more precarious in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I think, Patrick, you play Friday and you play Saturday like normal. You go TBD Sunday. And I know that's not what Pirate fans want to hear. It's something we've done in the past. It hasn't worked out. But you've got to do everything you can to win every single series. And you throw everything to the kitchen sink at them those first 2 games. And you hope that Ryan Towers hasn't thrown all weekend, or Sean Jenkins, or Nick Moran, who's more than capable of giving you 4 innings of work, hasn't thrown, and you say, hey, you know what, you're the starter, let's go out there, get me one time through the order, maybe halfway through that second time, and we'll piece it together. But, at the end of the day, you got to play every game to win them, and, if that means Sunday's TBD, Sunday's TBD.
Good to see you softball get a win and not horse around and have that thing drag on. And Shane Winkler told me before the game last night, we've got to – these midweeks – they're not dress rehearsals. They were games we get. We can't give up any more games in our midweeks, especially. So.
Number two.
Number two, yesterday, Commissioner Tim Pernetti of the American Conference released a statement. We're not going to read the whole thing for the sake of time and getting to Joe Giglio, but here's the beginning of it. He said, I believe in the mission of college athletics, the academic opportunities it offers, and the life-changing experience it creates for student athletes. I have a deep respect for my colleagues across college sports, the American Conference, and the people who work every day to strengthen it. This was Tim Pernetti. Obviously, he was up for that NFLPA job. He did not get it. This is his kind of restatement. The whole thing is on the Americans Conference's Facebook as well as X page. And this was kind of just him reinstating that he is still bought in very much to his job, or so it seems.
Well, yeah, because it's the job he's got now. It's not the job he maybe wanted.
Exactly.
But it's the job he's got now. So you're going to do the job to the best of your ability. I like Tim Pernetti. I've liked when we've talked to him. I actually was thinking we needed to get him on the show again soon. Maybe sometime in the next couple of weeks. We need to try to work on that, Bill, because I think there are always things to talk about with the commissioner of this conference, as there are with John Gilbert. These need to be somewhat regular updates from these two people because they're in the eye of the storm that is college athletics. I think the Pernetti statement is fine. What else do you expect him to say? It became very public that he was the runner-up for the NFLPA job, and so you just sort of. You make a statement, and I'm sure he was walking and chewing gum at the same time. I'm sure there were things he was working on that he'll continue to work on. So, next.
3.
Number 3, staying in the American Conference, Jeff Goodman put out a tweet yesterday that according to the Field of 68, South Florida head coach Brian Hodgson has turned down the Syracuse job. Many people thought that he would sign it immediately there in Buffalo after South Florida, whenever they get eliminated. It said that Hodgson will likely choose between going to Providence to be the head coach of the Friars or stay there in Tampa.
I don't know what's going to happen. We'll ask Joe Giglio about this deal in Syracuse because Syracuse on paper is a better job than Providence, isn't it?
Of course, yeah. This is not the premier program of the Big East. And Syracuse, if they want to invest correctly, could be the number 2 team in the ACC. They were the number 2 or arguably number 1 team in the ACC when they first joined it. And them and Duke were both sitting in the top 5 in the conference that first year. If they want to go out there and play with the big boys, I think that they can. Providence, look, are you Marquette? Are you UConn? Are you Villanova? No.
St. John's?
Oh, yeah. I knew I was leaving somebody out. Thank you.
You're not even Georgetown or Creighton.
No, you're you're hanging out with Seton Hall.
Right. I think he stays in Tampa. If you turn down Syracuse, why would you go to Providence?
Yeah.
Maybe
he likes the beach, and Syracuse is too far from the beach. That's all I got. That is the only reasonable explanation I could give you.
Tampa, but South Florida's put a lot of money into their stuff. They've put a ton of money, and they are putting a lot of money into their stuff.
4.
There's more top in potential than Syracuse, I think.
Yeah.
I understand what you're saying. I don't think Syracuse is going to be a top 2 team in the ACC.
No, they're not, but they stand a better chance than what's their names does. So
Providence?
Providence would, yeah. All righty, number 4. It was last night the most interesting first 4 night ever. State rallies from behind, hits 3 critical threes down the stretch, most of which were off balance, only to lose with 1 second left to the Longhorns, baby. Hook 'em. And the Longhorns are on to the next round to take on the Cougars of BYU, who don't know what defense is.
We're going to talk more about the NC State plight. Obviously, the story of the game, and I think it's great that they got Dick Vitale doing a domestic NCAA tournament game in some form before he is no longer with us. Not saying that's imminent. He and Barkley were great. but that had to be distracting.
It was.
I saw it was distracting.
It was, but hey, do a game nobody cares about. All right, number 5, U.S. falls to Venezuela in the WBC. First ever title for Venezuela. PJ, I was disappointed, of course, pulling for the U.S., but I'm glad that we lost to a country who cares. Italians didn't even know this was going on. The people of Venezuela, that was their Super Bowl. Congratulations. They brought their culture. They brought their people. They love baseball. They got the victory. Congratulations.
I agree with Smoltz. They need to move this thing to the middle of the season.
Ooh, I like it.
I agree with John Smoltz on that. That would actually be good. All right, we'll be back with Giglio. PJ Show.
We're back to the show.
I missed you. We all missed you. Did you miss him?
This is the Patrick Johnson Show on 94.3 The Game.
All right, Joe Giglio joins us from the OG Podcast. Wherever you download your favorite podcast, you can listen or watch the OG. Joe Giglio, braving the coldest conditions that any human should ever have to brave to be on the Patrick Johnson Show. But you're in the sun, so that's a positive.
Can't ask for anything more, P-Man. We got the NCAA tournament, we got the sun shining, and we're about to talk some hoops with one of my favorites. So here we are.
Well, I had, before the Tulsa basketball game, I broke bread with a young James Giglio. And what an impressive young person that is. You ought to be a really nice kid. I know everybody says that, but I just really easy to talk to. Nice kid. Just a good boy, that boy. So you and your lovely wife have a lot to be proud of.
Yeah.
Your other kid, I don't know. He sounds like a complete hellion. No, I don't know. I'm just kidding. I don't know. I don't know anything about him. I just yeah.
No, James came down to Charlotte and helped us out with the ACC tournament, so it was nice to have another voice to bounce off some basketball ideas with.
That is a good way to spend spring break. I mean, never mind, Panama Beach or somewhere in Mexico or that's what it's all about. That's it right there. He'll get more out of that spring break than he would have breaking the Giglio budget. So there you go.
Well, he managed to do both. He did end up in Panama City after going to the group game. So,
okay.
The best of both worlds.
Well, then, you know what? He earned his keep. I'm just going to put it at that. James earned his keep then to go to Panama City. That's great. I just made that up. So that's fantastic to know that Panama City's still a thing. All right. The great Joe Giglio with us here, one of our favorite people to talk to. NC State. Interesting that they were. You gave this. I forgot who posted it. I retweeted it. 18-6, early February. 2-8 the rest of the way. Now I understand. They played a little better end of their schedule over those last month or whatever it was. But where did it go wrong for Will Wade, who I actually think has been candid and honest the whole year, and I thought his comments in the post game. Other than it wasn't this golly gee whiz nonsense. I mean, it was we stunk.
Yeah, I think it starts with the roster construction. We've talked earlier in the season. I didn't think they were athletic enough. I didn't think they were tough enough. I don't think they were big enough. And obviously the size became a factor as the year went along. Anytime they played a bigger team, they struggled. They essentially became a team that was, if they made their 3-point shots, and more than just Paul McNeil, it needed to be Matt Abel, it needed to be Darian Williams, it needed to be Trey Holloman. And if they were hitting their threes, they could kind of trade paint with anybody and make it work. But they were just such a fundamentally flawed roster. And then you combine that with the way that they wanted to defend, which essentially was they switched on everything, tried to compensate for mismatches by doubling. And then once they doubled, teams really were able to carve them up on the perimeter, which is why you saw so many teams have the success from the 3-point line that they did. So really all of that was on display last night in Dayton in a game where they fell behind early. And then you saw some of their ability to come back. Ultimately in the second half of that game, they get down 8. It takes them till being down 8 in the last 2 minutes to find the urgency necessary to win an NCAA tournament game. And then I just thought the kid from Texas made 2 shots that were really, really tough, and they were contested and they were defending on him. So no complaints on that front. But ultimately, a team that was poorly put together, and a team that, quite frankly, I think Will Wade's going to have to admit was poorly coached. I never really thought he got a sense of the right combinations to make the team work. I thought they had 2 really good shooters in Matt Abel and Paul McNeil, and save for when Trey Holloman was either in foul trouble or injured, Will never really figured out how to play them together, and never really figured out that they were better off with Abel on the floor than Holloman. So I think, he can rightly point to the roster construction, which he had a large hand in. But I also think he missed on a couple of the different coaching points as the year went along as well.
So you say, obviously, and that's what it's about now. I mean, that's where I think you do still have to coach them. I mean, there has to be an identity and what have you. But you got to have, in this age where the coach could probably have a little more say over the ingredients to make the meal in an instant kind of way with a year-to-year proposition with roster construction. How do you fail on that? Because was it a lack of funding? I mean, is it just bad judgment? And is this something that State fans should really be concerned about?
Well, Will said last night not to be concerned, that he's got this and they're going to be hell and they're going to figure it out and they have a plan. But I do think there's a reason to be concerned because, the general manager they hired in Andrew Slater was a guy who worked as a scout for the Oklahoma City Thunder. And for your listeners who don't follow the NBA, Patrick, the Oklahoma City Thunder stockpiled an insane amount of draft picks.
Yeah.
And well into the future. And the reason they had hired Andrew Slater, who was a prep basketball, AAU basketball kind of observer, was because he knew the players and had a handle on, even going back to like 13 and 14-year-olds, because that's how far back Oklahoma City's draft stock goes, that you wanted to get to know and really understand these players and what makes them tick. And instead of kind of understanding the personalities of this group that they put together, it was really more of an analytical bent, and one that, quite frankly, I didn't like from the beginning, that I don't think served either one of those 2 people, Andrew Slater or Will Wade, well. And that's where I would be concerned, is you claim you have a formula that works. But I remember going to VCU. I went to Richmond in 2017. I watched VCU play. I watched his second and final VCU team play, and I thought, this is a tough team. These are Baltimore kids. These are 757 kids. These are Nova kids. And tough, athletic, didn't take any nonsense from anybody. And then he gets the job at LSU. He applied some of that sensibility, but really when he was at LSU, he was recruiting top 25 guys. Patrick, he was going for the top of the board. And I think that's the situation where you get a team this year, and he said it, these weren't the players that I wanted. They didn't fit the identity of what we normally have, which is tough, athletic players. And that's 100% on him. There's really no other way around that.
In this day and age where anybody throws out a tweet or a post claiming they have and I mean, this goes for weather, this goes for news. I mean, all kinds of crazy stuff. And I don't think we're quite to the age yet, Julie, at least I'm not, where we're falling for this. But unfortunately our parents are. They're falling for the meat. But I say all this to say there's all this information being put out now about, this program spends this much, this program spends that much. So again, I think it's for clicks. I don't know what's legit and what's not. But let's just say that we have kind of a rough idea of what the idea is on the budget there. I mean, does it need to come up for him to be able to go and get, as you say, top 25 caliber guys, or do they have to kind of hit them where they ain't for the time being?
Yeah, I mean, their budget this year is fair to estimate at $12 million. And I think the real, again, where I get into where they made mistakes, they duplicated at too many positions on the wing. Jerry Dang, who ended up being a complete and total bust. You have Trey Holloman, you have Arsenault. Those are 3 guys that they probably spent about $2.5 to $3 million on. And were not helping them win basketball games, ultimately. Holloman had the one game in SMU where he came up with a defensive stop, but you can't duplicate it as many spots as they did and then not have a glaring need in the middle the way that they did with really only Van Allen Lubin as their only functional big. So the price is going to go up, obviously. I think Kentucky was in the $20 million range. We could probably all guess Arkansas was probably there as well. But, those weren't the only two successful teams this year. So I think there's a way, to your point about hitting them where they ain't, there's a way to find players that kind of fit your personality. And I don't think they had enough of those. And that's where they really need to take a full step back and assess where they went wrong. I do think when they got there, the big market was set at a certain number, if you will. And then it quickly became, oh no, the price of bigs has gone up quickly. And they had one who ultimately ended up playing for Kansas. Who knows? He might even end up at NC State next year in Paul Mbaya. But they quickly found out that the big market, you had to overpay, and they needed to have more of those on hand than they did. And I think, if nothing else, I think you will see them have a minimum of 3 players who are 6'9" or bigger next year.
We're talking to Joe Giglio, OG Podcast. You were in Charlotte last week, and I do want to talk about Duke, and I want to talk about the tournament in some more detail. But what was the big, kind of undercurrent, underlining bit of conversation beyond what was going on the court from ADs, from, the ACC office people you have contacts with, even from any coaches that would, talk to you beyond what was going on the court? I mean, what was the big sort of undercurrent there last week in Charlotte?
Well, I think the ACC has made great strides in their investment in their programs, and I think Jim Phillips deserves a lot of credit for that. I think he really pushed them, particularly in this revenue sharing era, to say there's only one way for us to get better and be nationally relevant, and that is to invest in our programs. And by getting 8 teams in the field, that's double from what they were 2 years ago. So that's a significant improvement. I don't have a lot of confidence that you'll see a lot of ACC teams in the second weekend of this tournament. I am convinced that Virginia will be one of them now, after seeing them up close. But it's really impressive, even with their financial advantages, to see where Duke is, not just in men's basketball, but to realize we were in Charlotte and they won the men's basketball tournament there last year. They won the football tournament there this year. Their women's basketball team has now won their ACC championship 2 years in a row. And when you watch Duke, Patrick, and we were fortunate to be seated right behind their bench, they had 18 guys not on the coaching staff who were part of their staff. 18.
Wow.
Don't ask me what they were all doing. But one of their jobs, like the one guy, was clearly his job to call out and tell the assistant coach, this is the defense, this is the play they're about to run. Number one. Tells them the play, gives them the set, all that information. And then Duke's been an unbelievable second half team all year. And part of that is having that one person not just identify the plays that they're running, but also identify, here's our success rate against play X, against play Y. And that's why you've seen some of the amazing second halves that Duke has had this season. It's truly a full soup to nuts operation. But I think there were a lot of people in Charlotte, coaches, administrators, schedule makers, conference people, just kind of really in awe at what Duke has done and really what they've become. Because think about it, for most of our lives, Clemson was really good in football in the ACC. Then Florida State was really good in football. But neither one of them was that good in basketball. So it was always Duke and Carolina in basketball since the end of the Valvano era, right? But now Duke really is that guy who is running this league in both sports. And it's not, as there's a lot of people out there saying, it's because they got more money than everybody else. They absolutely have more money than everybody else. I get that. But they also have an infrastructure that's set up that is putting them in a position to have the success that they have. And that starts with Nina King. And I made it their athletic director. And I've made this point before. Mike Krzyzewski, arguably the greatest coach in men's basketball history. Certainly the best in Duke history. I mean, you can't deny what he has meant to Duke. But
Sure.
There were parts of Mike, particularly when he was younger, that were all about Mike. And any idea that Duke was going to invest in something other than men's basketball, and I'm not talking about field hockey and some of the other sports that they have had success in. I'm talking about football specifically. The idea that he was going to let Duke football have any kind of financial shine, you're crazy. You're crazy.
Yeah.
And I think Nina has done an unbelievable job in taking all of the things that have been successful for men's basketball, the corporate support, the infrastructure, the analytics, all of the things, the support staff, nutrition, weightlifting, all of it. I'm saying everything. I think she's done an unbelievable job of applying what has worked for them at an elite level in men's basketball and applying it to women's basketball and football and baseball too. I use some other choice words about their baseball coach on my podcast where there are no FCC rules because
Right.
I believe he quit on his team. They had a chance. Think about this as an ECU audience. They had a chance to go to Omaha last year. All they had to do was beat Murray State at home.
And this is
And
Pollard
he already
last year
knew.
you're talking about.
Yeah, he already
you're not
knew he was
talking
taking
about
the Virginia job.
Yeah.
And basically quit on his team when they were on the precipice of going to Omaha. So you can imagine the words I use when there are no FCC regulations for that person.
Sure.
But to my point, even their baseball program, which forever was underfunded and no one cared about, has had tremendous success, including winning the league twice in the last 5 years. So I think there is some of that catching up to everyone in this league, including the University of North Carolina, who I believe made their Bill Belichick power play last year due to the fact that they realized how far behind they were to Duke, not Clemson, not Florida State,
Right.
not anyone else in the league, but Duke. And as I like to say, Patrick, nothing happens in the triangle in a vacuum. And I think Duke is really kind of pushing their neighbors to understand we've already left you behind. And that's a tough pill, particularly for those in Chapel Hill to swallow.
I enjoyed last week the OG After Dark. I watched a couple of those. I actually re-listened to a couple of those because I like to put a podcast on when I fall asleep. And if I'm really struggling, I put this show on and I re-air it.
That's
and
good for us.
I'm out. Like, yeah, I'm 10 seconds in, I'm out on mine. I just put it back on and listen to it. But this was Ovius who made this statement. But you kind of talked it up, which you were great in those shows, by the way.
Thank you.
You talk about being able to say what you want, but then even you say what you want, and then after dark, Giglio's a different animal, folks. Let me tell you. But let me tell you. Let me say this: in Chapel Hill, because the big talk there was what are they going to do about Hubert Davis? Because you're looking at Duke kicking their tail at the end of the year, and I understand Wilson's hurt, but Duke's got injuries too, and I didn't think what they did in Charlotte, to me, might be as remarkable of what they did when they beat Michigan like they did. That was pretty impressive. And I know they were a little out of gas late in that game, but they were so smart at the end. And we'll talk about Duke here in a second. But I'm almost positive it was Ovius that said, North Carolina, couldn't even really get how are they going to get a new basketball coach and get rid of Davis when they can't agree on this arena thing? There's no direct message on that. There's all these different factions. And really the Belichick thing has driven a wedge and stuff there. I mean, it has shined a light on the fractures that exist, not just in athletics, but just within that university. That was a fascinating comment, and when you really sit back and think about it, it's pretty remarkable. And I just say that to kind of follow up on what you were just talking about with what Duke has done. And North Carolina, I don't know, you just almost get the sense that's a frozen in amber situation right now. If they were a rock band on tour, they'd be playing the hits.
Yeah, they've had a difficult time adjusting. I will say this. I thought Jim Tanner, their general manager, did a good job this year in putting together a team. I thought, much like Duke, is super reliant on Cam Boozer. So it's important to note, yes, Duke had 2 injuries, but it wasn't to their star. But
Sure.
I thought Carolina and Duke were similar this season in that they were ultra reliant on a single freshman. And once Caleb Wilson got hurt the first time, and they were in Raleigh, and they got their teeth kicked in the way that they did, I thought, oof. And even when he went out in the Miami game, I was like, he does way too much for them to recover without him. But then when they realized, we have a chance to get him back, I thought they recovered as a group. They beat Clemson and Louisville at the Smith Center. Those were good wins without Caleb Wilson. And then when he got hurt the day before the second Duke game, I think that knocked the air out of their tires. Because when you think you're going to get a guy back, you see the efforts in the way that they played against Clemson and Louisville. Those are a direct result of saying, hey, let's hold down the fort until Caleb gets back. And then I think the second injury, the right hand injury, I think it really knocked them back. And it'll be interesting to see who shows up against VCU. Obviously, in the first 35 minutes against Clemson, they weren't very good. But in the last 5, they were very good. So can they do enough against the VCU team? That's a little bit like NC State in the sense that they shoot a lot of threes, not the biggest team in the history of the world. They do have more athletic wings than NC State does. But ultimately, they're not a great defensive team. It just feels like a team that's going to want to run with Carolina, which I think Carolina probably wins even without Caleb Wilson. And I also think Hubert Davis has done a really good job in their first games in the NCAA tournament. Mm-hmm. He's 3-0 in those games. He's won those 3 games by an average of 27 points, including a coin toss game last year in the first 4 against San Diego State, and a coin toss game the first year in 22 when people forget it was an 8-9 game against Marquette, and they beat Marquette by 30 points. So, much like Roy Williams, who went 24-1 in his career in the first round of the NCAA tournament, the one loss being in the last one against Wisconsin in his final season. Much like Roy Williams, his teams are always ready to go at the start of the NCAA tournament. I suspect they beat VCU. I don't have a lot of confidence, though, that they're going to beat Illinois in the second round.
Gotcha. Is it a pipe dream to think Caleb Foster's ready for Indianapolis should Duke get that far?
Likely, but I've seen stranger things happen. He was in a boot in Charlotte. It's so different now than when you and I on a scooter. So different now than when you and I were growing up.
So was Big Pat. He's playing this week.
Yeah, exactly. But to me, it's like, okay, he had surgery. Obviously, it's at Duke. I don't know about you, but I've had back surgery at Duke, major back surgery at Duke. And they did an unbelievable job, but I'm just a civilian, right? Like, I'm not making them millions of dollars. So I can imagine that there's another level of treatment when you're talking about one of the players that helps them generate all the revenue that they do. And if it can be done, I would say it will be done. I think Gungbo will play for sure. I think they need Gungbo more than they need Foster. It's interesting, Patrick, I've been predicting that Duke will beat Arizona in the national championship game for about 2 months now, since the start of January. Because Carlos Boozer's team beat Arizona for the national championship in 2001. And if you remember, Carlos Boozer broke a bone in his foot at the end of January against Maryland and was able to come back for the Final Four. And Duke used 6 players to get to that championship and win that championship. And history doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. Now, instead of one of the Boozers getting hurt, it's Foster who gets hurt. And now his second son, Caden, is the one who has to fill in and play the role of Casey Sanders, if you will, who, remember, filled in quite nicely on that 0-1 team as they went on to win the national championship by beating Arizona. So I just think it's written in the stars that Duke is going to beat Arizona for this championship. And it also helps that the last 3 of the titles that Duke have won, 15, 10, and 91, were in Indianapolis. I think it also helps that Mike Krzyzewski's first national title was in Indianapolis. So, again, history doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. And also, if you look, Patrick, a lot of the legends of the game won their first title in Indianapolis. And I believe that John Shire is on a path right now to be one of those legends of the game. So it would fit in with a Billy Donovan, a Tom Izzo, a Lute Olson, a Mike Krzyzewski. Those are all guys who won their first title in
And it's where he got his title as a player as well.
2010. Exactly, Bill.
We got Joe Giglio with us here. So you've got Duke and Arizona. Who else is in the Final Four?
I was surprised at Michigan's draw. I think maybe the committee was drinking because Duke beat Michigan and every other good team in college basketball this year, not named Arizona. So it was stunning to me to see Duke's draw compared to Michigan's. I do not trust Elliot Cadeau, though. And Michigan has not been the same. Oh, man, I'm cleaning up my language in real time here. I think I will not use the sexual metaphor. I will say this. I think Michigan peaked in December, and they are very susceptible to being knocked off. And every year there's one quadrant that goes a little haywire. I think it'll be Michigan's. I don't know how haywire it'll be, but I could see Iowa State coming from out of there and by not even having to beat Michigan, to be perfectly honest with you. And honestly, wouldn't surprise me if Kentucky came out of that region. Like, I think you're going to see the most of the turbulence come from the Midwest. From the other side, everyone is banking on Florida and Houston to play in the Final Eight. Patrick, if it was that easy, everybody would get it right. If it was that easy, there would be no casinos. If it was that easy, there would be no gambling apps on your phone. So one thing I can almost guarantee you is it won't be Florida versus Houston for a spot in the Final Four. I don't love the way Houston has played down the stretch, but I do get the sense that if they play Vanderbilt, they'll just out-tough Vanderbilt. So I like Houston to be the other team in the Final Four.
Wow, good stuff. What is the big, Syracuse gets turned down by South Florida. Jeff Goodman reported that.
Hodgson. Yeah, Brian Hodgson.
Yeah, Brian Hodgson turned him down. Gonna either go to Providence or stay in South Florida. Weather-wise,
I would feel really good about South Florida if they lost in Greenville this year. They didn't, though, right?
No, they didn't play there. They played in Tampa. They didn't get a return engagement coming into. That didn't happen right? This year. What's that? Tell me what that rule is. You win in Greenville, you win the whole thing? What is that? Tell me.
No, you lose in Greenville, and you make the Final Four. Marquette did it
Kelvin
in
Sampson.
03.
Yeah.
And Houston did it their first Final Four trip. They lost here, and they went to the Final Four. Yeah. So I always look for the one who's going to lose in Greenville. I'm like, that would make me feel better if South Florida had lost it at Minges Coliseum, but obviously that didn't happen. No.
Giglio has all these laws of the wolf.
I know.
Giglio has all these laws of the wolf, laws of Greenville now. I love it. This is why we love having Giglio. No, look, they're making a play in Tampa to whenever the next round comes of expansion to be a part of it. I mean, they are putting not just big money into basketball. They are putting a lot of money into football. They're going to have, according to what I've been told, a really healthy NIL budget for both sides of the ball in Tampa. So, I mean, that's, you could do worse than that arena, that town, that weather, that state. And they're about to get a new football stadium. To me, that seems like that's the next one that's coming, more so than Memphis. Of that G5 group to make a move for the P4. Anyway, with all that said, I mean, of the jobs that are open in the ACC, which one is the most desirable at this point? I mean, it's crazy that Syracuse, with everything that Syracuse has accomplished, can't get a guy that they coveted.
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of a power struggle going on up there in upstate New York. I still think the answer is Syracuse because I do believe the investment will be there. They were slow converters in the NIL transfer portal era. I get that. But I do think they finally seen the light and the importance of investment. I don't mind it for them, Patrick. Jim Boeheim was there for 50 years. Again, cleaning up my language in real time. And he got one guy in Adrian Autry, but I would not mind them hiring Jerry McNamara, and I would actually bring in Mike Hopkins with him as his consigliere. I would go back to the zone. I would go back to their identity. I get it. I know I sound like a Nebraska football fan in 1989 or 1999, telling them, hey, go just run the wishbone, do what works for you or has worked for you. I find it strange to watch Syracuse when they play man, to be perfectly honest with you. So I think Syracuse has the money. I think they have interest. I don't know if you've ever been up to a game up there in the Dome. The town really revolves around Syracuse basketball more so than any other thing. And I think they can get players from New York City. I think they can get players from Boston. I think they can get players from the Northeast, Detroit, all those years ago when they got Derek Coleman. I just think I wish Boston College was a better job because, quite frankly, the Catholic Church has got plenty of money, but they just don't want to spend it on intercollegiate sports, which I don't always blame them for. And then, Atlanta's the same way. Like, Georgia Tech should be way better in football and men's basketball than they are. And that really is a willingness. And, you talked about South Florida moving up. I really do wonder in 2030, Patrick, if any of these power teams move down. If they just opt to say, I'm getting off the hamster wheel. I can't do it anymore. I'm not willing to do it anymore. And, it probably would be someone like a Boston College who would say, it's awesome that we had Doug Flutie, but what do I need any of this for? We're still going to be a prestigious school. We're still going to have, but we'll still be a destination for students in the Northeast and for Catholics everywhere. So, because right now what they're doing is they're trying to win left-handed, and it's not going to happen in this era.
I could see BC doing that. I think but it's amazing. Even now, a lot of it is, I think, construction-related debt. But I mean, look at Penn State's athletic department, red ink right now. I mean, there's a tipping point, Joe. It's coming. I don't know when it comes. And I think the SEC, we want to break off onto our own. See, I view that from the other side. I think that's a lot of bluster. I think there's a little bit of bluster with that. Why would you leave a system that you have essentially authored that benefits you seemingly, and where you still call to then go create something on your own that, I think that there's a bigger play there. They want something. There's something they don't have access to right now that they want. And that's what this talk is. Now, I could be totally wrong. They could just go form their own thing. But I mean, why would you leave a license to print money, seemingly, which doesn't appear to be
would be to get away from the NCAA and whatever flimsy rules are left. But also, but the only way they could break away, P, is if they took the Big Ten with them. And I think right now, their leadership groups are not on the same page. And if they were, I think they would break away. I think you might see them even add other teams to get to a bigger number, like the NFL, right? Because what do you have right now? 16 and 18. There's 34 between those two conferences. Maybe my math's off. Maybe
that's correct. That was
34. Okay.
Pilk knows math. Giglio Pilk knows math. He knows nothing else about English, but he knows math.
Yeah. I think you could see them add 6 schools and basically say, like an expansion franchise, oh, SMU, you want to be in our group and you're willing to pay for it? Come on down. Florida State, Clemson, Carolina, Duke, you want to be part of our group? Well, here's the expansion fee, and we'll be in a 40-team league. We'll only play each other. We'll set our own rules for the playoffs. We'll put, by that point, they'll put 24 of the 40 in, right? So I think that's kind of their idea, is more so leaving the establishment behind. I think they would still want to have their own contract negotiation rights, television contract negotiation rights. And when you say, where is the tipping point? To me, that's the tipping point. Once you stop having exponential growth in their television contracts, which they've had hand over fist. But the point is coming, Patrick, and I think you're seeing some cracks in the dam already on the Big Ten side in particular, because they've negotiated with 3 different networks. And if you're NBC and you're getting Illinois versus Northwestern as your big showcase game, you're not happy with that. No. For them right now, you have Ohio State, Indiana, Michigan, Penn State, Oregon. I'm sorry. I'm not that interested in USC versus Purdue. I certainly don't care about any game that's involving Rutgers or Maryland. So, I think that's where you're kind of looking, could the tipping point come? And that's why I think you're going to see after 2030 some more movement on that front. And quite frankly, I don't mind if they want to break away and do my preference, Patrick, would be that they did break away for football and let us have back these other sports. My gosh. I think it's we're only starting to see the toll on the non-revenue sports. I think we've already seen it in men's basketball. And speaking of revenue sports, like the splits on their records when those teams out west travel and when the teams from the east travel, I mean, it's pretty telling, the records for those schools. Yeah. And just imagine what it is if we dug into the volleyball or field hockey or the other sports. It's the same premise.
Hey, Joe, good stuff. I think we kept you too long, but I really appreciate your time, and we'll catch up with you, I'm sure, here sometime in the next few weeks.
Appreciate you and Pilk looking after James Giglio. Take him home here through this baseball season, okay?
All right, we will. There he goes. The great Joe Giglio on the OG podcast with he and Jovius. All right, we'll be back to wrap up things on this Wednesday. Stay tuned. Well, that's all the time we have for today. Thanks to Joe Giglio. We'll join you tomorrow for a brand new edition of the Patrick Johnson Show right here on 94.3 The Game, 94.3thegame.com, and the IBX Media app.